When I visited St. John's Abbey in Collegeville, Minnesota, one of the monks there introduced me to a little book called Tales of a Magic Monastery. It has short stories or parables in it to make us think and put us in touch with some of the deepest mysteries of life. One of the parables is titled 700 Leagues, and it goes like this. 700 leagues. It wasn't easy. But why didn't you go to join a monastery near you? Because I had heard that this was a real monastery. Oh no, my friend, this is not a real monastery. This is just a magic monastery. Oh, 700 leagues. Well, could you direct me to a real monastery? Why don't you just stand by this door and let people in? If you can even once really let someone in, he will direct you to the real monastery. The end. Proverbs 9, 1 through 6 reads like a parable. It tells us a story of wisdom even as it imparts wisdom to us. And what is wisdom exactly? Poet and writer Susan Sink says, wisdom is with us and beyond us, accessible to humans in the world around us, but also greater than our minds can grasp. Pastor and author Thomas R. Stegall gives us some background from Scripture. He says, in the early days of covenant history, the prevailing and operative theology was what scholars call Deuteronomic. People believed that God was present and active in the world, enforcing a basic and binding moral code. God rewarded the faithful, punished the wicked, and did so immediately. The world was predictable and orderly. With the exile came a radical reworking of this Deuteronomic theology. Now people believed that the world was still predictable and orderly, but it was upside down. The righteous would suffer, not at the hand of God, but at the hands of the wicked, while the evil prospered. They believed there would come a day when all would be put right again. Later, after the exile and rebuilding of the temple, both of these theologies were still in place, but neither proved entirely suited to the new circumstances of the people. Wisdom evolved as a third option. Such wisdom realizes there is unpredictability in the world. Sometimes the righteous prosper. Sometimes the wicked do. God is neither obviously nor immediately evident to bless or punish. And so in this sense, wisdom helps us navigate the tensions in our world and to ask questions about the mysteries and the ambiguities we live with every day. Proverbs is wisdom's literature. The first 9 chapters of the book form an introduction to wisdom. The rest of the book is filled with sayings, nuggets or pearls of wisdom that were meant to be passed down to future generations. In our text for today, wisdom is personified as a woman. She builds her house. She prepares a feast. Wisdom works hard. It's important to note that even though we read about her actions in these few short verses, what is described here takes time and persistence. Building a house, preparing a banquet, these are not activities you can rush. And that's the way with wisdom. Dr. Tim Meadowcroft describes it as something that is hard-won and achieved in the heat of daily choices and compromises, the very stuff that most people deal with all the time. Wisdom that's founded in the fear of God is for the hurly-burly of daily life on all 7 days of the week. Wisdom builds. She works, she prepares, and she invites. All are welcome in wisdom's house. All have a place at her table, and there's plenty to go around for everyone. You who are simple, turn in here. To those without sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Lay aside immaturity and live, and walk in the way of insight. The word translated as simple is from the same root as immaturity. Neither term is a negative one. Rather, both point to those who have not yet grown into wisdom. Those without sense are literally those who lack heart, which implies those whose will is indecisive. In short, wisdom calls to all of us and has much to teach us. My grandfather on my mom's side was a joyful man. He liked to laugh and joke around and almost always had a smile on his face. We visited my grandparents' house often. They didn't live very far from us. And every time we got ready to leave, we'd hug Grandpa and say goodbye. And the wisdom he shared with us every single time we left was, "I know you're not going to behave, but be careful." And he would laugh. Now, the writer of Ephesians doesn't send us on our way so easily. We're instructed to behave and to be careful how we behave, how we live. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise. The writer of Ephesians draws on the wisdom tradition of the Hebrew Scriptures, calling us to choose what is wise, urging us to make the most of the time. Now, we can all think of slogans and sayings that have made their marks over the years. From ad campaigns like Nike's "Just Do It" to the saying, "Keep calm and carry on," these ideas stick with us. Several years ago, the slogan that captured our imaginations was "Seize the day." Carpe diem in Latin, this phrase was first coined by the Roman poet Horace more than 2,000 years ago. It was featured in the 1989 film Dead Poets Society, where Mr. Keating asks his students what it means. One young man answers, "Carpe diem," that's seize the day. And Mr. Keating, tying the phrase in with a poem, asks, "Seize the day, gather ye rosebuds while ye may." Why does the writer use these lines? Another student answers smugly, "Because he's in a hurry." To which Mr. Keating responds, "No, ding, thanks for playing anyway." He goes on to talk with his class about the reality of death and making the most of the time we have. Ephesians says to make the most of the time, to seize the day. The language here is like a person trying to get a bargain, grabbing it before it gets away. It's as though life is a flash sale and we better not miss the opportunity. I wonder if we might hold that idea alongside the opening of our Ephesians text. Be careful then how you live. And alongside wisdom's call and the way that wisdom unfolds over time. See, it's easy to take on a posture of grabbing at life, grasping for control and power and what we want. And in fact, the writer of Ephesians warns against this as well. Do not get drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. We get drunk with control, power, greed, fear, pride. The list could go on of the things that cloud our judgment and numb us to the work of God in and around us. So make the most of the time. Seize the day. Yes, and wisdom tells us to be open to receiving. I remember playing catch with my dad and him teaching me how to catch a softball. I wore my glove on my left hand, and as the ball came toward me, I wanted to grab it, to snatch the ball out of the air. And over, my dad would tell me, "You can't swat at it. You have to let it come to you. You open your glove and receive it." That's what wisdom calls us to do, to be open, to receive. That's how we make the most of the time. That's how we seize the day. We don't storm into wisdom's house. We receive the invitation and go in, open to what we might receive, not grasping or taking, but receiving, accepting. It takes great care to live this way, which is why the writer of Ephesians says, "Be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. These instructions are for the community. This passage in Ephesians underlines the corporate nature of our existence and our salvation. We are connected with one another. The South African concept of Ubuntu says this most clearly. Archbishop Desmond Tutu defines it like this. It is to say, my humanity is caught up, is inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. We say a person is a person through other persons. It is not, I think, therefore I am. It is rather, I am human because I belong. I participate. I share. A person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others. For this person has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that they belong in a greater whole, and they are diminished when others are humiliated or diminished or treated as if they were less than they are. In this idea, I can be I only in relation to you. We become persons as we engage others and therefore cannot be fully human by ourselves. Human beings are interdependent and communal. That's why wisdom is relational. Diana McLean Smith created the conflict and change method leading through relationships. She explains how we only know in part. Human beings see the world from the inside out. We can see what we're feeling, and we can see what somebody out there is doing to trigger those feelings. It's from the inside out. We know what we feel and what others do. You did this, and it really ticked me off. But what we can't see as easily is what we ourselves are doing, or how it's making somebody else feel, unless they tell us, which oftentimes they don't. We have blinders when we're interacting with other people, or a group is interacting with another group. We don't see 50% of what's happening. We only see our 50%. And we cannot see what we're missing without the help of other people. Diana goes on to share a case study from Pittsburgh. Historically, Pittsburgh is one of the most segregated cities in the country. Everybody lives in a different neighborhood along demographic lines. People from different neighborhoods didn't talk with each other or seem to care about each other at all. And then the Tree of Life massacre happened. This was an anti-Semitic terrorist attack in October of 2018. A shooter killed 11 people and wounded 6 more. It was the deadliest attack on any Jewish community in the United States. After this tragedy, something happened for the first time in the history of Pittsburgh. These communities came together. The first one to step up was the Muslim community. Others quickly joined, the Black community, the Asian American community, and others. Everybody stepped up and said, not only are we going to come and help you in this moment of crisis, we are going to build relationships that last from now on. They worked together for 3 years to figure out how they could communicate to anybody who was hateful and violent, not in our town. They worked to build bridges across their communities. When George Floyd was murdered, the African American community called on the network that had been built and said, "We need you now." When the pandemic hit, the Asian American community mobilized that network as well. What's happening in that city is a stunning tribute to what friendship can do across divides. Wisdom calls us to community. We're often afraid of having open conversations with people who are different from us because we're afraid of losing control. We grab onto what we've always thought because it feels safe and comfortable. Our fear of the unknown and even of being wrong about things can numb us or close us off to those around us. Professor Jamie Clark Soules explains, "We have learned the danger of vilifying those outside our communities. Not only does it harm others, but it also tempts us down the path of self-righteous arrogance. Drawing deep lines in the sand, marking us and them, and then criticizing them, keeps us from seeing that we are them and they are us. What wisdom offers is hospitality. Wisdom invites us in. When we receive her hospitality, we also learn to offer it to others. We learn to invite them in. That's where wisdom is found, in community, in opening ourselves to one another, expanding the table. If we really let each other in, if we open ourselves to true friendship across all divides, we'll find ourselves at wisdom's table, making the most of the time. We'll realize that more than a final destination, to dwell in the house of wisdom is a process that continues throughout our lives. The invitation is always there. Come in. Let others in. Really let them in. There is wisdom in community. Amen.